Happy Sunday, everyone. Hopefully, everybody had a good week and is having a good weekend. Hopefully, you're feeling recharged for the week coming up. But today, I wanted to do a little bit of a follow up video to one of the first videos that I ever made, which was my top 10 favorite Charizards that I own. However, I wanted to do the inverse of it and talk about five Charizards in my collection that I'm not super big on. So with that being said, real quick, we'll kind of go over the criteria. There isn't a whole lot for it. The first and the biggest is I have to actually own it. There will be a dishonorable mention on here that we're going to talk about that I don't physically own. However, I wanted this list to be stuff that I could actually show you all. So other than that, the other piece of criteria that I wanted to focus on were cards that were at least like a holo rarity or better. I know Charizard's had a few prints where it's been just kind of a common. I know they're very few and far between. Vivid Voltage is the most recent one that comes to mind. I didn't want to put that one on here just because I didn't feel like it commands the same type of attention or same value as some of these other ones in that. So I just didn't feel right about putting that one on there and saying that was one of the worst when there are other cards that, like I said, they were either chase cards or they hold more value or they were promos. And to me, they were just kind of stinkers in that. The other reason for that too is we're also currently redoing our basement, and that particular Charizard is in a binder somewhere downstairs with the rest of my bulk cards. And just because we're moving a lot of stuff around in that, I just didn't really feel like, moving a whole bunch of boxes just to get to one card and briefly say, hey, I'm not going to compare it to this. So because of sheer laziness, we're keeping the criteria very, very small. But I don't also want this to be a pure hate video in that Charizard is, my favorite Pokemon. I also believe there is a case for it being one of the greatest Pokemon of all time just because of its impact culturally. So I also thought I'd kind of point out maybe some things that they could have done a little bit different with them. So we're going to go ahead. We're going to get started right into it. Some of these, as you can kind of see already in that, I do have other cards to kind of compare them to. So we're just going to go ahead and jump right into it. The first card is the Hyper Rare Charizard from the Obsidian Flame set. So I'm going to show you as well the regular version of it. I believe this is just the full art. With them adding all these other different kinds of rarities, sometimes I get a little tongue-tied on which is which. But yeah, so for the regular full art version, I know I've kind of talked about how I don't really care for all of the full arts having the same white background, maybe a few minor differences here and there between them. However, I don't think the way to improve upon that is just by simply switching the card's background to gold, which we will also be talking about gold cards, as you might have already seen a little bit later on into the video on that. So my big reason for putting this on here is, for starters, the stance that Charizard has on both of these cards, it's exactly the same. However, there is a bit of a price difference between these two. I'm not sure what the current price differences are. I really don't check prices a whole lot, but I do know this one here, it's at least worth several dollars more than the other one. And with the only difference being the background, I just feel that there was a little bit more that they could have done. Even though I'm not super huge on gold backgrounds in general, just because a lot of times they'll reuse the same artwork, I think if they would have just done slightly different with the stance that Charizard's in, I feel like that would have been enough to kind of justify this card being added to it. However, to me, it just kind of felt like, this was thrown in because, of course, Obsidian Flames, the big draw to it was the Dark Terra Charizard. And it was just, another way for them to add in another Charizard that, would be a chase card in that. Overall, though, I do think gold cards are in a much better spot than where they have been in previous iterations of the Pokemon card game. So I don't despise this card by any means in that. I just wish, maybe something as simple as like a stance change would have made this card a little bit more alluring to me. That being said, I do still like it. I did want to complete the whole Charizard set from Obsidian Flame, so I am glad that I have it. Again, just something as simple as like a little bit of a stance change. I thought really would have done something for the card overall. So getting into our next spot then, it is the Radiant Charizard from Pokemon Go. So I was pretty excited when Pokemon Go first came out. That is the TCG expansion. And I did see that they did all three of the Kanto starters in their shiny forms. However, once my initial hype kind of died down for it, to me, I just kind of felt like the card was a little bit boring. I do love shiny Charizard. Again, I think it's one of the coolest shinies out there. I am a sucker for black shinies as well. So like Haxorus, Rayquaza, Greninja, a lot of them. I love their shinies, and anytime they get those on cards, I love it. But that being said, the overall artwork on this card, I just kind of felt was overall pretty boring. It just didn't do a whole lot for me. Thankfully, though, with Crown Zenith, we did get another Radiant Charizard that was printed. And this one, I think, definitely was a big improvement over the original. So again, it still kept having a shiny Charizard, but I think just having the background and it, it looks like it's flying over some sort of water formation. I just thought it looked so much better than the original, kind of to the point where, of course, I'm happy that I have the original, but I really don't pay it as much of a mind. Like for me, this card, as soon as it was released, it just completely outshined its original. So I am happy that, of course, Pokemon did go back, kind of redesign it. Of course, I think that's just because this was a big chase card in that for the Pokemon Go set, outside of Mewtwo, which was a pretty big feature for that set. Having the shiny starters was another thing. I do wish they would have done Blastoise and Venusaur, kind of given them better artworks as well, because I felt like they suffered for the same reason as the Radiant Charizard from Pokemon Go. Of course, it's like I said, it's always cool to see them in their shiny forms, but sometimes just having them as shinies doesn't always do a whole lot if the rest of the card is just kind of boring. So overall, like I said, I am glad to see that they did fix this up, and I am happy with that. I just think it would have been cool if we would have got something like this to start us off with, and then maybe transitioned into something, maybe like a full art, or, like one of the gallery cards where, there was more artwork added to it. I think that would have been pretty cool. But again, that's Monday Night Quarterbacking. I'm just going to be happy that we did get an improvement over it. So Pokemon Go, it's not off the hook just yet though, because the next card on the list is the standard Holo from the set. So again, I wasn't super huge on the Pokemon Go set kind of after all the hype died down, and I was able to get a lot of the cards that I wanted pretty immediately. I want to say I bought about 3 or 4 maybe ETBs and pretty much completed everything that I had wanted from the set just from them. The Charizard at first, of course, I was always happy to see that it was in there, especially seeing that it had not just its regular form, but also its shiny form as well. Again, though, after kind of getting this card, my hype for it died down pretty quickly. And this might be a bit of an odd reasoning, and if it doesn't make sense to you, that's perfectly okay. It might only make sense to me. This is totally a personal preference, and that's the same for all of these. These are strictly my opinion. If you love any of these cards, hey, more power to you. I fully support that. But for me, though, what kind of hurt this card, I guess, for me was Charizard just looks a little cartoony in it. And I get it, Pokemon, it is an anime. It's not meant to look super realistic. However, I just think with the way that they made Charizard in this, it looks a little bit more cartoony than normal. And with having kind of the hyper realistic background, it just didn't mesh as well as I wanted it to. Granted, like I said, this is from the Pokemon Go set, and the entire premise of Pokemon Go is you can find, Pokemon in the real world. And so I get what they were going for with it. Just from an artwork standpoint, though, this card just didn't really do a whole lot for me. Again, it is a cool card. I don't think it's abysmal by any means. There are definitely worse cards out there than this, and for all the other cards on this list for that matter. But this is just one where, whenever I'm showing people stuff, nobody really tends to get very excited for it. So the next card on our list, and to me, this was just such a missed opportunity. This is the promo, Sun and Moon, to commemorate, I believe it was the 20th anniversary of Pokemon, the first movie. So I know the movie at this point, it's 20 years old. Probably a lot of people who are watching this video have probably already seen it or at least know about it. But the idea behind it is, Mewtwo was upset with humanity and was using clone Pokemon as kind of a way to get back at them. And three of his bigger clones that he had, or more popular ones, were Charizard, Venusaur, and Blastoise. So the way that they did differentiate, the original from the clones was, as you can see, this one does kind of have some stripes. That was just to signify that it was a clone. However, I just think that this was a card where they could have done like a good bit for it, especially with it being the anniversary of the movie coming out and being released. I mean, I get it. Like, in the movie, this particular Charizard was supposed to be a villain, and it does have, like the arms crossed, kind of giving you the evil side eye. However, I do think that, had they maybe expanded upon the artwork a little bit more, it would have looked pretty cool. Whether that being, inside Mewtwo's castle that it had built, it engaging in battle with Ash's Charizard, I just felt like that would have been a really cool way to capitalize not only on the anniversary of the movie, but also a way to kind of help portray this Charizard being an antagonist outside of just having the typical like scheming bad guy pose. But yeah, overall, I was actually pretty happy to see that they did do a promo featuring the clone Charizard. Again, it just kind of goes back to, I think, like it was an opportunity where they could have made a banger, and they just did kind of something casual, understandable. But I think it was a very missed opportunity. So we're going to be talking about our dishonorable mention here real quick. But before we do that, if you could do that evil trifecta of like, commenting, and subscribing, I would greatly appreciate it. It does help out the channel. So for our dishonorable mention, it's the only one that I don't own, which is why it's not on this list. Otherwise, it would be at number 1. That is the Illustrator Rare Charizard from the 151 expansion set. For me, I felt like it was just an opportunity that was completely mishandled. For those of you that have seen the card, you might already know what I'm talking about. If not, just do a quick Google search of it. Basically, it's just a very minute sized Charizard flying around in, I believe it was like around an island or something like that, some sort of rock formation, which I don't think in and of itself was a bad idea. I just think that the print size of the Charizard on it was so small that it just kind of felt like, somebody was maybe taking a picture of that formation and there just so happened to be a Charizard in the background. I think had they maybe zoomed in a little bit on it, or, done something to where it kind of justified it having a smaller size, then that would have been okay. But just for how expensive that card currently is versus, what the artwork looks like, for me, it's just kind of left a very sour taste in my mouth. Of course, I probably still will want to pick one up just so I can say I have it in my collection, but it's kind of also a bittersweet thing as well. I'm not going to lie. I don't feel too great about knowing that I'll have to shell out a decent bit of money just to get a card that I'm not super excited about, but that is the collector in me. Because it exists, I want it. But so we're going to move on to my least favorite Charizard that I own, and that is the Charizard and Reshiram, or Reshiram and Charizard GX promo. I believe this card was originally released in the Sun and Moon set tag team. I might be wrong, but it was somewhere around that era of Pokemon. Again, for me, the big thing about this card is I feel like the gold background is really what took precedence, and a lot of the other thought into the artwork of the card just doesn't really do anything for me. So outside of the gold background, really the only other colors, and this is of course not including the text on it, is you do have kind of an outline of Charizard in red and an outline of Reshiram in gray. Had this card maybe only had one other printing, or this was the only way to get this card, I think I would have been a little bit more okay with it. However, it wasn't. There were two other Reshiram and Charizard cards printed. This probably being the most common one that people see. And I think when you compare the artwork to the base form of it compared to the golden promo version, I think it's just night and day. For me, gold, I get it, it does designate a little bit of a higher rarity. But for me, artwork is really the big thing that I'm looking for. I'm not someone who plays, the card game. I simply collect them. And for me, one of the big driving things is the artwork. And so I think, with this particular Charizard and Reshiram, I think it did so much better. And then on top of that, there is another version of this card, which again showcases both Reshiram and Charizard on it. I was initially thinking of picking that one up. However, my brain kind of shut off that day. Thankfully, though, my one buddy, his brain was working, so he did pick it. So that Charizard is in a good home right now. But yeah, kind of after coming back and, telling myself I wasn't going to get it because I already had these particular two, I then started to kick myself in the butt because it's like that artwork I just thought was infinitely better than this one. It was maybe on par with this, but again, I just don't think that printing a gold background always means that it's better. I get it for, collectors and that it does designate usually like a higher rarity, which means it's also worth a little bit more. But from the art side of it, it just looks really boring and doesn't do enough to really justify it for me. But again, it is a move that, I totally get why the Pokemon Company did it. It wasn't just Reshiram and Charizard that they gave this promo to. They also did it for Pikachu and Zekrom. Reshiram and Zekrom are both very popular. They're the box legendaries for Black and White, so they do have a pretty significant fan base behind them already. Charizard and Pikachu, of course, are probably the two most popular Pokemon out there. So I think kind of putting those two together, and of course they already did have printings beforehand, it just made a lot of financial sense for the Pokemon Company to sell a product. And of course, hey, I can't bash anyone for doing it because I bought both of them myself. But that being said, I wouldn't say it was buyer's remorse, but I was definitely hoping that they could have done something to just improve it after buying it. But it is what it is. Anyways, those were the 5 Charizards in my collection that I just really don't get crazy excited about. Like I said, for some of them, I felt like they were maybe a missed opportunity, or there were some small artistic changes that could have been done. For the 2 gold ones, I think, it's for me, it's one of those things where just putting gold on something and then having the value go up doesn't always mean that it's a better product. I do hope that moving forward, and Pokemon has done this, I think their artwork has gotten much, much better over the years. Granted, I know that's a very subjective thing to say. But yeah, I've enjoyed a lot more of the recent artworks that we've gotten. So I do hope that they maybe learn from that kind of moving forward. That way when we look back at Reshiram and Charizard here, and then maybe just our Charizard EX, and we start, if they do continue to do gold cards, maybe see something that, kind of justifies the reason behind it. Do something that with the Pokemon themselves that, really makes it stick out, and then have that gold background be something that actually amplifies what's already a phenomenal artwork. But that's the video, everyone. Thank you for watching. As always, we will be doing another video either at some point this week or next week. I do want to try and get another opening. I've been looking around to see if there's anything out there that would be kind of cool to open. But right now it does kind of seem like we're going through a bit of a dry patch with releases. So we'll see what's all out there, of course. I am trying to look into getting an ETB of the Pokemon 151. I know, just after kind of trash talking the Charizard EX in it, still want to open more. And if I do get it, hey, that's phenomenal. But as of right now, the only thing I have found have been the UPCs, and they are priced a little bit higher. And I just don't know if I want to commit to that when some of the stuff in there I already have. We already did an opening of that, and I do know the regular ETB does come with some different things. But as always, stay tuned. Of course, we'll have some shorts kind of going up throughout the week. In fact, we'll probably be having a Skyrim one going up tomorrow. But again, hey, thank you all. Enjoy your week, and we'll catch you next time.